Thank you for joining this final session for day one of the PM Squared Conference 2020. Now, there aren't many people involved in risk management who don't know of David Hilson, the risk doctor. But those who don't or who haven't heard of him speak are in for a treat because of his many contributions to the subject of risk management over many years. That's why he's a fellow of the Project Management Institute, the Association for Project Management, the Institute of Risk Management, the Royal Society of Arts, and the Project Management Institute. You've probably already seen David's bio and his contributions during the course of today in the chats. I personally have been looking forward to this session because I always learn something valuable when David speaks, and I'm sure you will do. David Hilson, over to you.
Brian, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and welcome everybody to my session. I hope you've enjoyed the rest of the first day. I certainly have. I found some very interesting presentations to watch, and thank you very much for choosing this as your closing session for today. I hope you will learn something interesting and useful. I'm just going to share my screen now so that we can enjoy the slides together. Here we go. And I hope you can see these safely. So I'd like to talk to you about hunting birds, about black swan hunting. It's not really about hunting birds. It's really about handling emergent risk through developing resilience and flexibility. And we don't have very long in this session, so I'm going to have to move quite quickly. But please do, if you have any questions, put your questions in the Q&A panel in the Hoover app. And then after this session is finished, I'll go to that Q&A panel. I'll pick up your questions and I'll do my very best to answer them right there. So in risk management, one of the challenges we have is prediction, seeing the future. And wouldn't it be wonderful to have a crystal ball that we could look into so we could see exactly what was coming down the track towards us and then prepare for it? Niels Bohr, a famous Danish physicist, said prediction is always difficult, but especially about the future. And I think I agree with him. But there are 6 characteristics of the future that make it particularly difficult to predict. And I use this little pattern of letters, danger, to explain why the future is so hard to predict. First of all, the future is dynamic. It's not static. It's changing. And that makes it very hard, makes it uncertain. The future is also ambiguous. We're never quite sure what's out there, and it makes it hard for us to understand and analyze. The future is non-linear. We can't just take what's happened in the past and project it forwards into the future and say, well, tomorrow will be like today, just a little bit different. It might be completely different. For G in danger, I've made up a word. It's not my make-up word. It's made up by somebody else, but it's the word glocal, which is a combination of global and local. And the problem with the future is the connectivity between things at local level and things at global level. We have local events and activities which have global impacts, and we have global things which have local impacts. And that makes it very hard to work out what's going on. In terms of E, the future is emergent. Things arise that we haven't really seen coming, which come from, we might say, from left field or from a place that we hadn't previously predicted. And finally, the future is relational. We're all connected to one another in this global village. And that makes it very difficult to work out exactly how things are going to pan out in the future. Each of these 6 characteristics makes the future very difficult to predict and makes our risk management challenge even harder. What I'd like to do in this presentation is to focus on the emergent nature of the future and to talk about emergent risk. Emergent risk has a number of other names. We might call it unknowable unknowns. I'm sure you've heard about known unknowns and unknown unknowns. Some unknown unknowns are unknown but knowable. We don't know them now, but we could find out. But some unknown unknowns are unknowable. We couldn't find out about them no matter how hard we tried. We might call them ontological uncertainties, things which are uncertain because of our worldview, because of our way of thinking, because of our conceptual framework. It's impossible to see these things because they're completely outside of our frame of reference. And these kinds of uncertainty have become known as black swans, following a book published in 2007 by Nicholas Taleb called Black Swans the impact of the highly improbable. I can't read the words. Black swans. Now, in his book, Taleb said that black swans have three characteristics. The first is that they are completely inconceivable and therefore unpredictable. They are ontological uncertainties. We could not see them coming no matter how hard we tried. They are completely outside of our way of thinking. When they happen, they have very big impacts. And then once they have happened, as we look back on them, we think, do you know what? I should have seen that coming. Although beforehand they were completely inconceivable, afterwards we rationalize and we say, do you know, we could have seen that. Whether that's true or not, well, maybe nobody knows. Let's have some examples. Taleb talks about his turkey. And you imagine a turkey on a farm thinking, do you know, everything is wonderful. As time goes by, my well-being increases. They feed me, they look after me, they give me a really nice place to live. They protect me from all of my predators. And life is pretty good. And as the days and the weeks and the months go by, the turkey gets fatter and fatter and feels better and better until one day he has a terrible shock. And he finds that he's shipped off to the abattoir and he has a very difficult ending. And maybe that's happened to some turkeys in the last few weeks, and there are a few more of them it's going to happen to in the next few weeks, as we've had Thanksgiving in America and Canada and other countries, and as we're coming towards the Christmas festival. A number of turkeys are going to find that their progressive well-being has reached a sticky end. This is the example of Taleb. The turkey could not conceive what was coming until it came. And these sorts of events, we describe them as disruptions, disruptive inventions, crossover technologies, or game changers. There are quite a lot of examples if we look back into history. And I'm just going to very quickly give you a few examples that you might like to think about. I'm sure you could think of more. The emergence of the internet, for example. Who could have seen that back in the 1980s? And now it's ubiquitous and we rely on it all the time. The change in Europe that came from the fall of the Berlin Wall, the development of social media, the financial crisis of 12 years ago. How about the oil crisis in 2014 when prices plummeted, or the migration that's happened in Europe? How about that B word that I guess we're not really allowed to talk about, or the T word in America? All of these things were inconceivable. Nobody could have imagined that they could have happened. The impacts were huge. But once they had happened, you could look back and see the signs and say, do you know what? Maybe we should have seen that coming. What about more currently? What do you think is our current black swan? Would you think this little beast is a black swan? I'd like to suggest to you that the coronavirus is absolutely not a black swan. Why? Because it was not unpredictable. We had the Spanish flu 102 years ago in 1918. Since then, there have been many coronavirus pandemics, and lots of work has been done on predicting the arrival of another coronavirus pandemic and what we might do about it. So the coronavirus pandemic was absolutely not unpredictable. What was unpredictable was what followed when the coronavirus pandemic arrived in January, February, March of this year. It was the global lockdown. I remember in February, I was with my wife in South Africa and we saw the cases arising in China, and the Chinese government imposed a lockdown on Wuhan and on that particular province. And then we had cases in Italy, and maybe some of you have been personally affected by that. And I turned to my wife and I said, you know, the Chinese government can lock down Wuhan, but that would never happen in Europe. You can't imagine a lockdown in a democratic country like Italy. It just would never happen. And then it happened. And we came home from Africa in the middle of March, straight into lockdown here in the United Kingdom. And we know how the year has evolved since then. The coronavirus was not unpredictable, but a global lockdown was. And the things that have followed from the global lockdown, I believe, are the true black swans of this year. No international travel. That's hit me very hard as an international risk management consultant. I've worked in 60 different countries all around the world, every continent except the Antarctic. No more. I can't travel. Maybe once we have the vaccine and I have my COVID negative certificate, maybe I will be able to travel. But who foresaw that the whole world would shut down? And what about those debt mountains? Hundreds of billions of pounds, euros, dollars, yen, which we've inflicted on ourselves. That is going to change the economic environment for decades to come. And those will prove to be the true black swans of this particular year. We didn't see them coming. They've had a huge impact. And looking back, well, maybe we could have predicted that. So I think black swans are a very interesting area. The problem is that we don't know where they're coming from. They are unpredictable, unknowable, but they're very big and they really matter. And we've no idea what might be coming around the corner. So what does that mean about black swans? We should remember that not all black swans are bad. If we think about the internet, if we think about the changes in Europe, if we think about what's happened in terms of some of the national changes and international changes that we've seen, they haven't all been bad. Some of the black swans that arrived that were unpredictable with huge impacts turned out to have huge positive impacts. And so we need to remember that, like all risks, black swans can be threats or opportunities. But what can we do about them? How can we hunt down the black swans that might be coming in our direction? If they're unknowable, does that mean they're unmanageable? I'd like to suggest to you that there are two ways in which we can manage the unknowable unknowns. And that's because they arise from a number of global causes and they have a number of specific local effects. If we can spot the causes and protect ourselves against the effects, then just maybe we can manage the unknowable. How might we do that? Well, let me suggest to you, first of all, with the global causes. How could we identify global causes that could give rise to unknowable unknowns, ontological uncertainty, black swans? First of all, we need to know where our vulnerabilities are. Where are the spaces in our protection, the things in our society, in our organizations, in our projects and programs, in our families, where we are most vulnerable? Then we need to be scanning the environment to see what's out there and see if we can see things coming that might touch us in a vulnerable area. And then we need to be looking for early warning indicators and triggers that might indicate that some of those things are on their way. I like to think about risk management offering us a risk radar that scans the future, which tells us where there are big bad things coming and big good things. So we can see the big bad thing coming very quickly over here and we can move out of the way or protect ourselves. We can see a good thing coming this way, which we need to steer towards and make sure that we capture. We have a risk radar that scans the future. And once we know where our vulnerabilities are, we can be looking out to see where there are things coming that might hit us. And on this slide, I've just added a couple of references that you might find helpful in terms of identifying global causes, which we don't really have time to go into in this very short closing keynote session. The International Risk Governance Council in 2010 published a report called The Emergence of Risks Contributing Factors, and they identified 12 global causes of uncertainty which could interact to produce black swans. It's a very interesting and a very important read, and I would recommend it to you. The IRGC has a website where you can download this report for free. And of course, the World Economic Forum publishes its annual Global Risks Report, which gives us a good view of what's currently happening out there in the uncertain environment. We should be reading that and thinking about how it could affect our own key vulnerabilities. Let's think about, though, what we could do to handle black swans if they arrive. If we can't see them coming, if they're unpredictable and we don't know what they are until they arrive, what can we do about them? Traditional risk management isn't going to help us. The standard risk response strategies, avoiding, transferring, reducing and accepting threats, exploiting, sharing, enhancing or accepting opportunities, won't work for emergent risks because most of these things are proactive. Emergent risks appear fully formed. Suddenly you hear the flapping of the big black wings, a black swan comes over your shoulder from where you haven't seen it, and it lands right in front of you and starts pecking. We need to recognize that our standard risk response strategies won't help us with black swans. We need a different approach. I'd like to suggest to you two strategies that we can use to manage black swans before they arrive. The first is flexibility. Flexibility is defined as the ability to bend without breaking. And if you look really carefully at the first picture on the right-hand side, you'll see that is one person being very, very flexible. If you count the arms and legs, you can prove to yourself it really is just a single person. The ability to bend without breaking, the ability to adapt easily and quickly like the chameleon. There's a proverb that says the bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists. We need to build flexibility into our projects and programs, into our organizations, into our societies, and also into our personal lives. And the second key risk response strategy to deal with the unpredictable is resilience. Now, resilience is defined as the capability or the capacity to maintain our core purpose in the face of challenge. It's not necessarily going back to doing the same things that we did before the challenge arrived. And one of the things we're going to have to think about quite carefully after the coronavirus pandemic is not going back to how it was before. We have the opportunity to do something different in the future, a new normal, as everybody is talking about, but we want to maintain our core purpose, our values, our integrity going forward in the same way that we did leading up to this challenge. So how can we do that? How can we be resilient in our purpose and values and integrity in the face of the challenge which has come that we weren't expecting? In terms of physics, it's the capability to regain our original shape after being deformed. And a word that we use in English is bounce back ability. The ability to bounce back from anything that challenges us. Do we have that in our projects and programs, in our organizations, in our societies, or in ourselves personally? Let me suggest to you that our projects and programs are much more like the image on the right-hand side than they are on the left-hand side. And for those of us who are interested in project management methodologies, we tend to view projects as the left-hand picture. We have a track, which is our project plan. We lay down the tracks in our project plan. We say, this is the way we're going to go from here to there. We have a schedule, a timetable that says we leave on this time and we stop at these stations. The stations are the milestones. We stop at these times and eventually we arrive at our destination on time. You buy a ticket. The ticket has a fixed price to ride the train. All of these things are in our project management methodology. But really, projects are much more like like sailing a small boat across a windy waterway, where the wind blows and the tide comes and the waves rage and small boats cross in front of us, and we have to maintain our objective whilst tacking backwards and forwards and side to side as we go across the water. Does our methodology respond to the picture on the right when we have it designed like the picture on the left? Well, you can decide. What can we do to build flexibility and resilience? We don't have very much time in this short presentation, and I'd like to leave time for questions, for you to be thinking about how this would affect you in your own practice. But let me give you some suggestions under 4 headings. The first heading is personal. All projects and programs, all organizations are built on people. And if we don't have flexible and resilient people, our projects and programs will fail, our organizations will be challenged, our societies will find real difficulties. We have to be flexible and resilient in here, in ourselves. And in order to develop flexibility and resilience as an individual, part of it is your natural character, the sort of person that you are. Some people are stronger than others. Some people are, well, they just have that kind of grit and determination. But you can develop that, even if that's not your natural character. You can practice emotional literacy, a development of emotional intelligence, which is active emotional intelligence, using emotional intelligence, understanding yourself. What's in here? Where did that come from? Awareness and appreciation. What's happening and why? Assessing whether that's appropriate. And then if it's not appropriate, asserting the need for change and taking action to change ourselves. And if what is in here is already appropriate, we can accept that and move forward. And you might have noticed 6 words starting with A, the 6 A's model of emotional literacy. Awareness and appreciation, what's going on? Assessment, is it okay? Acceptance, if it is okay. Assertion and action, if it's not okay. And if we understand how to do that personally, we will build flexibility and resilience into our personal character. And then just choosing just determining not to be beaten, just determining that if something happens which is threatening to disrupt me and take me away from my purpose, I will not be diverted. I will stay on course. And the exercise of will is very important in building personal flexibility and resilience. What about our projects? Projects also need to be flexible and resilient, and there are a number of characteristics that we can build into them. The first is being absolutely clear where we're heading. If we're in that small boat going across the bay and the wind's blowing and the waves are coming up and the tide is coming in, we need to know where we're trying to get to so that we can continue to steer the boat and respond to those challenges and get where we want to go. If we don't have clear objectives in our projects and programs, we're going to be in all sorts of trouble when our projects and programs are challenged. Building in contingency in time, in money, in resource, in performance, in any way that we can, having the right level of contingency will help us to make sure that we're flexible and resilient in the face of change. Having flexible processes where we can determine where we don't need to get 6 signatures in order to move forward, where we can do things in parallel instead of sequence, understanding where those flexible areas are in the processes, and of course having very strong change management. These things will help us in our projects to make sure that we're flexible and resilient in the face of change. And what about our organizations or our businesses? Knowing who we are, having a shared corporate culture is really important. It's rather like that inherent character in individuals. Knowing who we are as a business or an organization will help us to stay resilient in the face of change, and having processes which are robust, which are proven, which aren't going to break down as soon as something changes out of the ordinary. Grounded values, knowing what really matters to our organization, and then sticking with that no matter what happens from the outside. These things will help us as an organization to be flexible and resilient. And these ideas work at the societal level and the national level. Knowing who we are, what is our national or our corporate or our societal identity? What are our values? And making sure that these are coherent across all levels of society, looking to break down those barriers, those discontinuities, those hierarchies which are unhelpful, and then making sure that our society supports itself internally. That will build flexibility and resilience into our society and communities. If we wanted one word to describe all of these characteristics, whether it's at the personal level, the project or program level, the business or organizational level, or at the societal and community level, it might be this word, the word agility. I'm not talking about agile project management. I'm talking about the ability to flex and move depending on what comes in our direction, to respond quickly and effectively to whatever the situation might bring. So why is this important? If we can't control the volatile tides of change, which we can't, we can at least learn to build better boats. And I think that's where we are in the situation that we're in currently. The tides of change are racing. There's volatility everywhere that we look. All we can do is to build better boats, to make sure that we are better able to survive and thrive in these difficult times which are facing us. This matters because black swans are coming. We can't see them. They're unpredictable. They will remain invisible until they arrive. And when they come, they're going to have big and unpredictable effects. But we don't need to be victims of black swans. We can build resilience and flexibility personally, at project and program level, into our organizations, into our societies and communities. We can be ready. We must be ready. It's a matter of professionalism and responsibility. So I would urge you to do something about this. Get those black swans in your sights. Think about how you're going to deal with them before they arrive. And I would wish you happy hunting with all of the black swans that you happen to spot coming over the horizon. Make sure that you deal with them effectively. And if you need to take some advice from people who have done that before, well, you know where to go. I hope you found that helpful and challenging. I hope you found that there are some ideas within there, although they're very brief and I've presented them in summary, some ideas that you can take away and develop and use further, not only in your projects and programs, not only in your organizations, not even just in your society and communities, but personally for yourself when you consider the things that are disrupting you this year. Maybe job insecurity, maybe worries about health, maybe issues to do with your family or your future. We need to be flexible and resilient in here first, and I hope you'll be able to apply some of these ideas to help you as you move forward. Well, thank you very much for your attention as we come to the end of this first day of the PM Squared conference. I hope you've enjoyed the day. I hope you've enjoyed this short presentation. I look forward to seeing your questions in the panel, in the Q&A panel, which I'll respond to shortly. And I'll see you at the conference tomorrow and on Wednesday. Thank you very much. Bye for now.